I'm here today with the Actors Fund. We've partnered together to show you this and have this really healthy conversation around mental health, stressors, tips, um, and anything we think will help you kind of get through the holiday season. These are things that I'm sure you're concerned about. They're definitely things that we're concerned about. And so this is really just going to be a nice conversation. At any time, if we say things that, make you want to question or have a comment or just have some input, it's really important for you to use the chat option or the question the option. It really should be inclusive and fun. I know it's considered a webinar, but at the same time, we really want everyone to have a great takeaway and a nice full toolbox to utilize to get through the holiday season. So I want to introduce Roslyn from Actors Fund to introduce the rest of the team.
Hi, thank you, Nneka. My name is Roslyn Gilbert, and I'm supervisor in social services at the Actors Fund. It's been our pleasure to work with Nneka and with Bobby Score to develop this seminar series. Before we begin, I want to share information about the Actors Fund. As you may know, the Actors Fund is a human service organization that provides services to all who work in the performing arts and entertainment community. We provide a wide range of services, including social services and emergency financial assistance, career counseling, education and training, health insurance counseling and healthcare through the Friedman Health Center, Local 1's medical home, a housing resource center, and our own home located in Englewood, New Jersey. Most importantly, your Health and Welfare Fund contracts with the Actors Fund to be your member assistance program. We provide free confidential support and assistance for you and your family members. Our social workers provide short-term counseling and support, identify problems, and when appropriate, provide referrals to outside specialists and community agencies. We help with problems with stress, substance abuse, financial and workplace problems, as well as senior care. Today, I'm pleased to introduce two Actors Fund social workers, Katlin Blevins and Joshua Snow, who will join in this conversation to talk about healthy holidays, tips for a stress-free holiday. Nneka?
So we're going to start with a little relaxation and meditation that Katlin's going to walk us through.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katlin Blevins. As Roz mentioned, I've been with the Actors Fund for 8 years, and we wanted to start off today to do something to help us all relax and come together. So if everyone could just sit straight up in their seat, roll their shoulders a bit, relax, put your feet on the ground, uncross your arms. And we're going to close our eyes, or if it's more comfortable for you, just direct your eyes downwards, and we'll engage in some deep breathing exercises. So we want to start just by taking in a deep breath, and we want to take it in through the nose and hold that breath. And then release it slowly out through the mouth. If it helps, you can put a hand on your stomach to feel your belly rise and fall with each breath. So let's take another breath now in through the nose and count 1, 2, 3, and then release that slowly out through the mouth. And take another breath in through the nose and release it out through the mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And final one, in through the nose and release it slowly out through the mouth. And as you feel ready, just slowly open your eyes.
Thank you so much. That was extremely helpful. You don't realize how tense your body can be throughout the day. And so I'm hoping for those who have joined can really feel a little release. And I want to thank Katlin because that's one thing you can put in the toolbox right away as you just go through your day, whether it's in a holiday or not. So it is a holiday season. It is a stressful season. It's dark. The weather's changed. We're expecting snow, many of us. And so people are feeling tense. And now it's 2020, right? It's a very different year. There's a lot of grief, a lot of loss. We're on lockdown. There's COVID. You know, we don't celebrate in the same ways. And so I really wanted to talk about how people were feeling and what have you guys heard people were feeling, and how, one, what they're feeling, and two, how can they identify what they're feeling? Sometimes you feel so many different things, you know, you really can't find the right word to describe what's showing up for you. And so it's hard to say what to do next.
Well, I think, one of the themes that we are hearing on an ongoing basis is this consistent realignment of expectations, right? This isn't what anybody anticipated the year looking like, much less the holiday season. And so I think that a lot of people are having to manage their expectations of what the holidays will look like this year. We had to do it with Thanksgiving, and we're having to do it again, in December in this part of the holiday season. I think, often when Local One members thought about what the holidays might look like if they weren't working, because so many Local One members are working very heavily during the holiday season, whether it's over at Radio City or somewhere else, they anticipated getting to spend the holidays with their families, or their friends, loved ones. And 2020 has kind of thrown that out the window. So people are really having to manage, like, what does the holiday look like if I'm not working? What does the holiday look like if perhaps I don't have as much money as I anticipated?
Right.
And what does the holiday look like if I'm not working, but can't, travel to visit my parents or my brother or whomever, right?
Right.
So,
or if you don't, I can imagine if you don't have family either, right? If you're by yourself, looking forward to work, and being distracted by work is a good thing. And so I can imagine they're feeling grief, loss, maybe a bit of anxiety. Is there anything else you can think of that people can kind of be going through?
Well, when you're talking about grief and loss, just feelings of depression and feeling down. And I think one of the things that's really important is to try to identify why you're feeling that way. Because once you can identify what you're feeling and why you might be feeling it, then you can start working on some solution.
Right.
To be able to figure out, okay, what steps can I take?
Right. And I'm assuming that's how you would manage the expectation, right? So if I'm feeling grief because of work, how can I then utilize this time? If I'm feeling lost because I'm not with family, how do I decide to utilize this time? If I feel, so really figuring out what it is. And also, I would imagine being okay with feeling everything, right? Simultaneously and almost on like this roller coaster. So how would somebody identify a plan or identify, managing expectations? Like, what does that actually look like to manage expectations?
I think that's I was going to say, I really like what you said about being able to hold all of our experiences that we're going through at this time. And part of that, as others have mentioned, is acknowledging the loss that a lot of us are feeling right now about not being able to celebrate in the way that we had been celebrating, but also that it creates an opportunity for us to treat this holiday, the 2020 holiday season, as an opportunity to create a new tradition for this year. We get to do something totally different, partially because we don't have a choice, but also we can frame it as an opportunity to get to try out new things for ourselves. And for to your point, like, create a plan. So one way that people could try to create a plan for the holidays is that you can decide who you would want to see at this time of year, make a list, and then start organizing. Right? That's so important ahead of time, to set up a list of people you'd want to talk to, and then make a Zoom schedule for yourself if Zoom is something you feel comfortable with. If not, set up phone calls and kind of organize your holidays as if you were bumping into different people, going to different people's houses, and now you're just getting to do it from the comfort of your own home.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying if you would normally visit several people or see several people at the same time, maybe you should schedule a Zoom at 1 o'clock with someone or 3 o'clock with someone or 5 o'clock rather than having one Zoom with everyone and then you have kind of the rest of your day free or your time free.
Yeah, I think it gives people something to look forward to, right? Like in the morning, I'm talking to these people, and in the afternoon, I'm going to talk to these people. And it gives you a structure to the day that'll feel busy and full in a way that maybe we're more accustomed to the holidays feeling.
Right. I also like to do traditions, though. I think that's really a great takeaway. You know, what can I do now that I've never been able to do that I can continue to do, right? Maybe in the future, and I can add. What were you going to say, Josh?
I was going to say, you know, I think the two themes that really come through for me in terms of how to like plan for this new, this version of the holiday are make a plan and connect. You know, I think that like developing a plan ahead of time is going to make it much more likely that you're able to like follow through and have a full day, have as full an experience of the holidays as possible. And I also think that the idea of connecting, you know, connect with people that, to Katlin's point, you know, connect with loved ones, connect with perhaps people that you haven't spoken with in a long time.
Like
and
coworkers, right?
I'm sorry?
Coworkers, people you
Totally.
Right, you spend so much time with them. You probably spend more time with them than your actual family. And so I don't think people lean into that resource enough to say you worked with them every day for so many years. You're probably not really talking on a personal level, right? Because you're working. Maybe this is a good opportunity to connect with said people.
Totally. And the other thing that came up, I just want to backtrack just a little bit, because you asked a really important question, and you said, like, how do you identify the feelings, right? Because sometimes the feelings aren't on the surface for us. Right. So I think that one of the things that I think can be helpful with regard to identifying those feelings is I think sometimes we can't listen to the feeling. Sometimes we have to listen to the behavior, right? I think a lot of what we're seeing in this pandemic is people eating more, drinking more, moving less, right? And so I think, yeah. And so I think that sometimes looking at how we're behaving and how our behavior may have shifted in this past year can be a good indicator, like, well, why am I eating more? Why am I drinking more? Like, you know, what's happening? Like, what's underneath that action?
Okay. So let's say I think that, right? I know I'm eating more. I have nothing to do, right? I have nowhere to go. I'm sleeping more, right? I don't have a schedule. I know why. Now what?
Sure. I think one example of a way that people can kind of start to look at behaviors that they have been doing, right? And I think that especially on the holidays, like eating more and trying to like stay cozy, there's some kind of a nor'easter happening outside right now. It's understandable, right? And to Josh's point, once you've identified the behavior of like, you know what, I'm feeling sad and I feel better if I have a cookie or if I make something really rich, I feel comforted by that. So what we can start to do then is to think of other times when we also feel comforted. And sometimes that can be on a phone call with a loved one. Or if you find yourself drinking more often because you feel like it helps you relax, to think of something else that you find relaxing. I know for me, I love to try to get outside and go for a walk in the morning. So I wake up, you know, make a cup of coffee and then just walk. I don't know if I can do that tomorrow, but I try to do that like as often as I can. And it achieves the same kind of result, right, that you might get from having a drink. So I think that the easiest way to identify is to find a behavior or define an activity that yields that same kind of result for you.
So it sounds like you're saying, I like what you said about comforting, what gives you comfort, right? And so I would imagine making a list, right?
Yeah.
Hear what that is. I know we keep going into like connecting, and that's wonderful. But there are people who don't have families, and there are people who don't have a really good or a large social network. So what other resources or what other recommendations do you give when connecting is not a phone call away, right? What would you suggest for that person to do?
Well, I think it still is connecting. That maybe sometimes it's connecting with something that you love to do. Like if you love music, to be able to get involved with listening to, or maybe picking up an instrument that you played when you were younger and doing that. I have to say, if you're capable, and Local One guys, you are capable of constructing things, making things, having a project that you get involved in that you hadn't done before, doing something that's really, that's interesting. So you're connecting with your inner self and feeling good about that.
I also think, one of the things that someone can also do, I love the idea of connecting with loved ones. I love the idea of connecting with oneself, right? And one's interests. But I also think that we can connect with people that we don't know, right? I think sometimes being of service can be like a wonderful way for us to get that comforted feeling. And we actually, I can give you a link, Nneka, for you to connect members with, where people can volunteer of their time virtually or in person, depending on what works best for them health-wise.
You hit it right on the nose. I was waiting for someone to say that. So I like that, right? Family, friends, community resources, what brings you comfort, right? I like to recommend for people to watch things that make them feel nostalgic, right? For the holidays, I like watching the old, like Charlie Brown Christmas, 1,000 times, or just things that just make me feel good. Like I think about, believe it or not, Lifetime, that plays all these Christmas movies that are literally the same movie, right? Every movie is the same, but I still will watch like 5 of them because they just remind me of the holidays and it reminds me of family. So really thinking about that, cooking, cleaning, crafts. And again, and all those things can be added to the new tradition, right? Now, maybe every year we'll make this particular, I don't know, gingerbread house, I don't know, right? Or we'll make a ornament every year now. And now we can, add ornaments every year to our tree that are handmade. Things like that we just really didn't have time for, right? And really didn't think about. And so I think those are really great ideas. I want to kind of segue a little bit because we were talking a lot about the individual, but as you know, a lot of us do not live in silo. And so how does one person not only support themselves and keep themselves above water right now, but if you do have friends and family, how do you support them? Not only the ones in your home, but the ones out of your home, especially parents, right? I saw an SNL skit last week, I think. It was like it was a Thanksgiving skit, and they were calling to tell their parents they couldn't come to visit because of COVID. And the parents were just like, you're the worst children in the world, basically, right? And so how do you deal with those conversations? They're not that rare, believe it or not. People understand what's happening, but there is some fatigue, right? We're going back into a lockdown. And so how do we explain again that we're not going to show up and we're going to miss another holiday? And how do we support others during this time?
I think that's a really good question. Oh, go ahead, Ross.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's a really, really great question. And I saw that skit as well, and it's very funny.
Really good, yeah.
People should look it up. But one thing I was going to say is that an idea of how to try to start to navigate conversations like that, right? This is already a stressful time. So it's hard to imagine having stressful conversations on top of that. But one way it can really be helpful to navigate them is to acknowledge for other people, and for whether it's a family member or a friend, like, I know this is hard, and to allow them to have space for however they're feeling, right? And really giving them the acknowledgement that you hear them. Because I think sometimes when we're having difficult conversations, they're so uncomfortable that we have a tendency to kind of put our walls up and say like, no, that's not okay. You can't feel that way. There's a pandemic. And we want to say like, I get it. I feel that way too. I would rather be with you, but this is what I'm doing. And I think it's helpful to give people context too, that hopefully this is going to be a one Christmas phenomenon. right? That this is really 2020 that we're talking about, a year that's already kind of gone off the rails in several ways. This is the 2020 Christmas. This is not every Christmas for the rest of our lives. And I think that's important to give people context, but also to give them space to really have the reactions that they are entitled to have.
Mhm.
But, I think that's really a hard thing to do, to listen to your relative get angry at you because you're not going to be coming over to see them. And so I think it's really important to be able to understand and accept that somebody can feel differently. But being honest, I think being really open and honest and saying it really is hard for you. You don't really want to hurt them. You love them. You really want to see them. But this is not a time when you can do what we would normally do. And so I think the more that you can be open and honest and talk about your feelings and let them talk about their feelings without getting angry, without having conflict over it, and trying to be able to have that conversation.
I also think,
Go ahead.
and one last thing, I was just going to say, I go back to that idea of trying something new, right? I mean, I think that we are all suffering with Zoom fatigue,
Yeah.
right? I mean, whether it's meetings or like a webinar like this, as enjoyable as it is, I think that, we can get exhausted of looking at screens in this way. But I do think that if we try and engage our family members, let's say, nephews and nieces, like across the country, use Zoom to watch them open their presents on Christmas morning, or like have like a family dinner with Zoom. And I think it's a way for us to like rethink the way we interact with Zoom, which is a useful tool, but can be like exhausting, right? Because we're on it so much these days. And so I think the idea of trying to like reconceptualize it for something more fun and festive may be something good to think about.
And I think to Josh's point, something that you can do, and I think it's a way to help lessen Zoom fatigue in a way, is because just sitting and staring at a screen, it can be hard on your eyes. You can get kind of tired doing that. What I like to do sometimes is just to put my computer in like one spot and then kind of go about whatever I'm doing. Like in the kitchen, if I'm making dinner, I could have a family member on Zoom. And just like if they were sitting there with me, I'm not staring in their face the entire time, but they're there. And I can look over and I can see their face and talk to them just as if they were there. And I think that can be a way too to help lessen the pressure that you need to do something or say something to include that person in an activity with you.
Yeah, I really love all of those answers. I wanted to go back to something because I heard two different things that I thought kind of hit two different topics. And so, Katlin, I love what you said about how to hold space, basically, for someone, right? How do I hear you and not tell you shouldn't feel that way and things like that. But I wanted to add to that, how do we just listen without saying, well, you can do this too, right? I think that's very dismissive as well. When, I'm like, well, how can you be lonely? You have two kids and your husband's there, right? How can you be tired? Like, that doesn't make sense. Or someone has it worse than you, or, at least you're in a warm home. Yeah, I think this attitude of like, you can't be grieving and be grateful at the same time, right? It's this idea that if you're feeling this way, you're just ungrateful, which is just inaccurate. And so being mindful of that and being mindful the same way you have the knee-jerk response to say, don't feel that way, it's a pandemic, it's normal, the knee-jerk response to jump in and say, this is how you should fix it. Sometimes people know how to fix it, right? They just want you to listen. So maybe I would suggest that you could just say, what is it that you want from me? I think we forget to ask people sometimes what their needs are. Do you want to just vent, and do you want me to just listen? Or are you asking me for advice? Sometimes starting there, allows the person to feel heard and then, navigate it. But very differently. Sorry.
I was going to say, Nneka, I love that point. And I think it's so important, especially if we're anticipating like a difficult conversation, to set up expectations in advance for both the listener and whoever is speaking. Right. So I think it really kind of can dial down the temperature a bit if it starts to feel too intense, because you know what's expected of you. Right. And you're right. Like sometimes people just want to vent. And if you know that they just want to vent, then you've already set that up in advance. So you're not anxious or worried if you have to feel like you have something to say back.
Right, right. And I wanted to go to Roz's point about, how you have to explain to someone that you can't see them. I mean, if we want to be honest here, this is a country with very different political views. They see, science differently, wearing masks, whether we should have a lockdown, should have a lockdown. And sometimes that's a general generation disconnect sometimes. And so, you might have older people who are feeling much more afraid than some younger people. Or again, depending on what state you're in, there's so many different variables. And that's a different, difficult conversation. Right. And so going back to what Roz was saying, that made me think about that. What is the expectation there? Right. You're not there to change someone's viewpoint. Right. You're calling to say, this is what I believe is best for me right now. Even though I know you really want to see me, or, or the other way around, quite frankly. Right. I respect that you don't want to do this. And so what else can we do? And so just being mindful that, there are different types of conversations that will be difficult. Yeah. And so that leads me into addiction support as we talk about support, right? A little bit earlier, we discussed, just kind of indulging, right? And it's not always just like sweets. It can be alcohol, and it can be drugs. It can be anything, right? And so how do you help someone identify what is too much, right? If I am not going to work every day and I decide to end my day with a glass of wine every day, is that a problem? Once in a week is a problem? If I have a family member who is doing that, how do I address that? You know what I mean? So if you can start by answering, like, for yourself, how do I identify when too much is too much, in any situation? Roz?
You want me to answer that? Well, let me just say, I think moderate drinking or moderate use of marijuana and other things, I think you need to look at, how does it affect your functioning? How does it affect you when you have a certain amount? Okay. There are guidelines out there that say women shouldn't have more than one drink and men shouldn't have more than 2 or 3. And, that's what comes out of, Mayo Clinic and other places. And I think, figuring out, okay, what are the consequences? How does it affect you? How do you feel the next day? What happens when you have too much? I mean, and what kind of things can happen to you? Do you end up getting, so you can't walk well and you end up bumping into things and you could hurt yourself, or you end up just falling asleep, and are you going to feel better afterwards? So I think it's really, evaluating that. Also, you can call and talk to somebody and ask them. The Actors Fund, we are social workers, and we are available for, people to call us and to talk to us and to ask questions. And the other thing is, if somebody's in recovery, there is a lot of support out there. There are AA meetings, there are marijuana anonymous meetings, there are other meetings that you can connect with other people. The one thing this pandemic has done is it's really made online connections really possible. And so there's a lot out there. So that's another thing. But you certainly can call us at the Actors Fund to ask for some tips, ask for, help and evaluation about where things are. Because one of the things that's happened with this pandemic is the increase in substance use has been very great. I've heard that it's more like 40% increase, and perhaps even more, in the amount that people are using.
So, right, I think you're absolutely right about that. The thing is, what I want to talk about a little bit is, I think people know that the resources are there, right? And I hope people know the Actors Fund is there, right? But how do I get there? Because sometimes, if I want to be honest, I may not want to make a phone call saying, hey, do I have a problem? That may make me feel like I'm already admitting that there's a problem. And so that fear alone may not allow me. And so I like that you described what is moderate. Because if someone says moderate, you ask 5 people, you're going to get 5 different answers for what moderate drinking is. And so I like that you were saying, really check in with yourself, right? Is it making you oversleep? Are you bumping into things? What are other ways any of you can suggest, checking in on what is considered too much? Because again, too, it can be prescription drugs, it can be sleep aids, right? What if now, I want to kind of broaden it away from um, just marijuana and alcohol. I think alcohol is the biggest one, quite frankly, because that's what most people have easy access to. But just in general, a lot of other things we can become addicted to. So what else would you say could be an issue?
Sure. I would suggest one thing that I always like to keep in mind when anyone has a question about how much they're drinking or using any kind of substance, right? Is, do you feel a need to use that substance to get to a certain emotional state, right? So sometimes you'll hear from people, I need to have a drink to relax. I need to smoke at night to go to sleep. I need to use X to get to X or to get to Y, right? And I think that there's a way in which when a substance starts to serve like a specific function, that starts to raise like a red flag for me. Because even if you want to use alcohol or marijuana recreationally, I think you can start to get into more problematic areas when it's serving a specific function in your life. And obviously that doesn't apply to something that's like that you're taking as directed, that was prescribed by your doctor. But when you're taking things recreationally to achieve some kind of an emotion or to like feel better, and that's the go-to way that you try to do that, I think that that's where you want to start to keep an eye on it.
So I hear paying attention to how you physically respond, but also is it replacing, is it allowing you to get to a specific space, right?
Right. It's the only way you can think of,
I can't.
Yeah, it's the only way you can.
Right.
The only way you can think of relaxing is to have a few glasses of wine, and that's the only way that you feel like you can relax.
Yeah.
I when I start to get nervous when I hear like that's the only thing that works.
Yeah.
Because then I think that you start to use that substance and it can start to happen in excess.
Right. Right.
I think another good barometer could be to look at your relationships. Are you fighting a lot with your spouse after you have a few drinks, or you smoke, or whatever it is, right? It may be more subtle than that. Like in the mornings, like, are you barking at the kids more, trying to get them ready or to try and interact with them? Or like, have you begun to isolate? Do you have any relationships? Or is your primary relationship with a substance, right? I think that those can all be good indicators that maybe something may have escalated.
Right. These are really good answers. I wanted to make note of a comment saying that for Local 1 members, Bobby Terrell has a support group every week. And so not only can you go to the Actors Fund, we have a resource as well with one of your members and peers that you can work with. So I think that's great. So
there's the hotline too, and I don't know if people know that there are other Local 1 members who are there to talk to you and to help you. In the past they would take you to a meeting, but I think, now they're probably talking and giving you some tips and what to do, or telling you, about meetings, or just listening and trying to be able to help you.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that those resources are really readily available, right? I don't think the members are unaware of all the resources that they have at hand. I think it's getting there is really the issue that comes up. But I want to lean into now, how do you support others, right? That, you have a family member or a friend or whomever, that you're starting to see things that they don't see, right? You're starting to see the behavioral change. You're starting to see the isolation. You're starting to see the excess, or what you believe to be excess. How do you have a conversation without, I don't know, accusing or getting shut out, and really holding space for them in a way that would make them want to talk to you? Anybody? Josh? What do you think, Josh?
Well, I think that coming at it from a place of concern and care, not accusation. I think that is, you want to be someone who is coming at it from being on that person's side, like a teammate. You guys, I've often heard Local 1 members refer to their fellow union members as brothers and sisters, right? You want to come at this issue from the perspective of being on that person's side, not like an outside critic, right? And I think that is coming at it from a place of compassion is number one for me when I think of how do you address this issue with somebody that you care about.
You know,
And I'll
I think,
add to that, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Roz.
I think one of the things that stops people is a feeling of shame, feeling that, you know, when they talk about having a problem, they feel like they've failed and that it's hard to get past that. And I think it's really important to know that if you really do open up, people are empathic, they care, they want to help. And so it's really hard to step past the shame, but I think it's important to try.
And I'll just add to that, I think Josh put it really nicely, to think of people or to think of yourself as being this person's teammate, right? This person that you're concerned about, and coming at it from a place of concern. But I will also add that sometimes when people are facing down a behavior that other people find concerning, it can be scary. It can be really frightening to think about going it alone. And so even just saying to that person, like, I will go with you. I will be there with you. I will stay with you the whole way. And so they feel like they have someone they can really go through a process with, that can be really encouraging and supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually segues perfectly into how do you safeguard sobriety, right? And so we just talked a lot about how do you identify if there's a problem or not. But outside of the resources that were just mentioned, and just to let everyone know, after this, we'll send a list of the resources so they can be all in one place. Also, with the list that Josh is going to send us about where you can volunteer. So anything we discuss now, we'll put all together and send to everyone. But what do you say to the person who is dealing with sobriety and has all these resources? Is there anything in addition that you would advise?
I'm going to go back to connect. You know, I mean, I think that we mentioned before, I think Roz mentioned that online 12-step meetings, Dharma recovery meetings have proliferated since the quarantine initially started. But I think, you know, sometimes it's not about like getting on a Zoom meeting. Sometimes it's just like about reaching out to somebody and saying, look, what's going on? I'm having a rough time. Or maybe it's not even about saying I'm having a rough time. Maybe it's just about making that phone call, you know, and talking to your buddy about like what they've been up to, you know, and commiserating with them, or just catching up. Sometimes just like reaching out and talking to someone about the snowstorm we're about to have is enough to make you feel grounded in a connection, but also to give that craving a moment to pass.
Almost like a distraction, would you say? Would you describe it as that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, another thing I want to bring up is, you know, meditation. You know, the Actors Fund has been providing mindfulness meditation courses that are free. And we're going to be having more starting in January. But every day during the week, Monday through Friday, the Actors Fund has a meditation at noon. And that can be a very good way to connect with yourself in a calm way. You know, I've sat in on some of those, and you know, when you have a guided meditation, sometimes at the end you're just so, you know, you just feel so calm, and you know, and I think that's one of the things that's helpful, to have something like a meditation practice that you can learn to be able to just be connected with yourself in a calm way.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. It speaks to the breathing exercise we started with, you know, just those breathing exercises, just having that whenever, you know, I sometimes even during the day just feel a little bit scrambled. I was talking with some members about this very recently. When you have a full calendar of things to do, but also feel like you have nothing to do. And so, you know, that weird space, and you know, it's just kind of just like all over. Thursday is Tuesday, Tuesday is Sunday, you know, right now for a lot of us it's just other day, you know. And so how do you center yourself? So I love that you have the breathing exercises. I love the meditations. I know that happens about between 12 and 12:30, right, daily. But you can also, if for whatever reason, because of homeschooling or anything, you can't do that, you know, YouTube, they're very accessible. There are all these free apps that you can utilize that even to help you sleep, right? There's all this access. Thank God for phones and smartphones that you can just kind of have things at your fingertip. That doesn't always allow you to slow down, right? I would love to get up every morning and meditate for like 20 minutes before I start my day, but I may just be listening to it while I'm making coffee, if that's the closest I can get to just like some peace to kind of start my day. So be flexible. I would advise to really be flexible with trying to get your needs met, which goes nicely into stress reduction, right? So not only we talked about all these feelings and tools and what to do, but there's like a lot of stress, right? We spoke very briefly about time, right? But also money, right? People are not working, they're not getting paid. The bills are still coming in, right? Holidays, your children, if you have children, still expect gifts. So there's a lot of stress. You can't plan for the future, right? This kind of space of limbo of knowing we might start, might not, vaccine maybe, there's just so many variables. And so what would you suggest for someone? One, if you can define for me what a stress reduction plan is. And then secondly, why it's important and how they can establish one. Second and thirdly, how they can establish one. Katlin, I see you smiling. So what do you think?
Yeah. I'm keeping track of the questions in the order. So a stress reduction plan for me is understanding it's like a toolkit, right? It's something that you can carry with you. And when you start to encounter situations that give you a high amount of anxiety or start to stress you out, you have something already in place. I think this is one of the biggest things that I've learned is if you've cultivated a toolkit, something that you can continually refer back to, then when you encounter a stressful situation, you're not reacting, right? Like in the moment where you're flustered or maybe you don't know what to do, you already have some things that you know that you can rely on to help reduce your anxiety.
So you said writing a list?
Yeah, absolutely. Having it in your phone or thinking of things in advance of like what calms me down, right? Like what centers me, what makes me feel more relaxed. And then there are also techniques that you can pick up and use in individual situations.
Like?
Right. Sure. So one of them is that if you know that a certain situation can be really stressful for you, then there are ways in which you can avoid it, right? If there are people or places or activities that you know in advance are going to stress you out during this time, or even in general, you can just opt to say no, right? And to avoid them. Come up with a pre-scripted reason. If it's someone you don't want to see, come up with something if you know they're going to reach out to you, or if you don't want to connect with them because you know their company causes you anxiety, find a way to avoid the situation in advance. Another example could be like you can alter plans, right? You can ask people to alter behavior that you find stressful. There are different ways that you can kind of try to attack the problem or the stressor.
What I hear you say first is to identify the triggers then.
Sorry, say that again?
Identify the triggers.
Yeah.
Right? So first identify what are the things that cause you anxiety.
Absolutely.
And then once you identify, come up with an alternative plan, things to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then if you can't
ask them to change if it's possible.
Right. And if you can't avoid set triggers, then use your stress reduction plan.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways we have to adapt, right? There are certain situations, whether it's a family member or a job-related circumstance or anything, an environmental stress that we have, and we just can't avoid it. So we have to learn how to adapt as well.
So I think a good example of that would be like, I know that, I remember the news would trigger you, right? If you know that news trigger you, don't watch it 24 hours a day, right? Watch it for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening and just get informed. So things like that is what I'm hearing you saying.
Absolutely. And if you know that that's one of your triggers, there are actually on some phones now, there are settings that you can adjust, right? So you're speaking kind of specifically to news, but some people find social media, especially during this time, to be really like anxiety provoking. Like we don't feel good sometimes if we're seeing things that we feel like we're missing out on or reminding ourselves of people we've missed. And there are settings that you can put on your phone that can help remind you to limit your intake of that.
I love that. I love that. I talk to members and other people a lot about becoming a compareaholic, right?
Yeah.
And we sometimes cause ourselves pain by scrolling through, and everyone seems to be living this luxurious life and they're not affected by the pandemic at all. And what's wrong with us and what are we doing and what's next for us, right? And so I try to remind people that, like you said, there are settings, but you also control your feed, right? You control what you take in, right?
There's a mute button.
You don't have to look at that, right? You can choose not to. You can choose not to watch certain things. So I really like that. I want to go a little bit more into the stress reduction plan. I know you said, figure out what this is and write a list of the things that helps you minimize stress. But how do I get there, right? Because sometimes I'm stressed already and I can't remember to go on my phone to look at my stress reduction plan because I'm already kind of looping, right? My thoughts are all over the place. I'm already going down a rabbit hole of what next and what if and what happens. How can I avoid getting there to actually utilize the tool that I set up?
So one of the things, I can't remember if Katlin and I were chatting about this earlier in the day or if she mentioned it over the course of the webinar, but one of the things that came up when we were talking is the importance of perhaps putting in place like a self-care, a stress reduction routine. Right? One of the things that she mentioned was that she likes to go ahead and first thing in the morning, make herself a cup of coffee and go for a walk. That's not going to work for everyone, but I think that the idea of like putting in place a routine that you feel supported by, that you feel like is enriching. Like I think of Katlin like making her coffee, like grinding the beans, like it smells good, it's warm. She takes it out on the walk around her neighborhood. And I think that getting the physical exercise is something that she's doing there, like treating herself to a nice cup of coffee that makes it feel like she's taking care of herself. That's something else that happens. And if you are able to incorporate those kind of activities into your daily routine, perhaps we are all going to have a moment where we spiral, right? But perhaps we experience that less if we've got the scaffolding of our routine around us.
I love that. I think you hit it on the nose. I think at its most basic level, having a routine, right? Just having a routine. When we forget that when we're working, we have one, right? We get up, we shower, we do whatever, it's just the same thing every day. We rush from one place to the next. We have this limited time to do chores. We have this limited time to see family members. We have a routine. And as soon as this one variable has been removed, all of a sudden we don't have one. And so reminding people that you can still have a routine, right? You may be not getting up at 6 in the morning and you might decide to now get up at 9, right? That's fine. But you're still getting up at that time, right? And you're still deciding to make a cup of coffee and maybe exercise and maybe go to the Zoom or maybe have a phone call, whatever, right? But the same thing, I was talking to some members about this earlier. For myself personally, starting a routine of just like making my bed in the morning, right? I haven't done that in years. Don't shame me, right? But like something like that, it's simple, but it has kind of just shifted how my whole day has went because I get up and I make the time to do that. And it just starts my day with a structure, right? It also leads to my bedtime, right? I have a comfortable space to come back to. I can rest better, so it's just kind of this full circle thing. And who would think something as simple as making a bed could shift the entire day? But that's how powerful routines are. I want to go right into, you just hit on the nose, our last topic, which is self-care, right? I'm going to be totally honest. I hate the word self-care. I think it's such a buzzword. It's super overused. And I think self-care is so broad and you only hear it in like the same ways, like take a bubble bath, and things like that. And it's just like those are wonderful things too, but I understand self-care is also like, things that you mentioned earlier, understanding your triggers, right? Minimizing them, setting boundaries. That is also self-care. And so what are some ways that you guys can, identify self-care for members? So it's just not the same thing of like bubble baths and tea and all that walks and all that stuff is great too. But I think there's this broader space that self-care kind of fits in.
So something that stands out to me right away is the idea, and it's kind of a broader, it's a self-care like technique, right, that we can apply to a whole range of things, and that's to really be present. And what I mean by that is that as New Yorkers, we are so used to multitasking. Like on my commute to work, I used to be like writing an email, drinking my coffee, placing an order, watching the light. Like I was always doing like 10 different things at once.
Right.
And this pandemic, especially in the beginning, like it was really hard for me to slow down and to stop doing that.
Right.
Even if it wasn't necessary, I would be, on a Zoom call with friends and checking my phone. Why was I? It's not that I don't have enough time. It's such a force of habit to keep ourselves constantly busy. But what I think that does is it really lessens our ability to enjoy the moment that we're in. And so I think this kind of connects to multiple different areas. But like if you're taking a walk, take a walk. Like don't try to answer emails on your walk. Don't do anything else. Just go on a walk. If you're going to watch like this wonderfully cringy, bad TV show or Lifetime movie, which I totally endorse as well, then just watch it. Like don't do something else while you're doing it, because then you're really not getting the full experience and you're not present. Because I think a lot of the time we get ourselves very stressed out. I call it like anticipatory anxiety, where we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. And we're working ourselves up. And if we're able to stay in the present, I think we're less susceptible to start being activated by those triggers.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of also being like intentional, right? I think that made me think about how many times have you been with dinner with people and you see like 5 people at a table and they're all looking at their phones, and they're not really there. They're there because the pictures are there, but they're not there. And intention, I think about that even at home, right? Like even when I'm having dinner, do I need to watch TV while I'm having dinner? Or could I just sit in a quiet space and have dinner and actually taste the food, right? And things like that I think we've just, taken advantage of and gotten used to. What are you gonna say, Josh?
I was just going to say, I feel the same way about the term self-care that you do. To me, it feels like really basic. Like I was able to like wake up and brush my teeth or get dressed this morning, right? But I think, when I think about it a little bit more deeply, I think, and I think this is true for most people. I think it's especially true for Local One members. You guys are, you folks are problem solvers, right? You're making sure that everybody is safe. You're making sure that all of the work is taken care of in the way that it needs to be for a show or a production to go on. And you're also like working for your families, for your loved ones, perhaps, to make sure that the bills are paid, to make sure that the toys are bought for the holiday or whatever that looks like. When I think of self-care more deeply, I really think about it as offering yourself the care that you offer everyone else. Often we will put everyone else in our lives first, and we just kind of write off our own needs as like dispensable, right? And I think that when I think of self-care, I think of like how can we take care of ourselves and offer ourselves the same regard that we offer the other people in our lives. As Local One members, when you're rigging a show or you're making things safe for performers, you're making things safe for audience members, you're taking care of other people that you don't even meet, you don't even know, perhaps, right? And so it's like, how can you take care of yourself in the same way that you're taking care of others? So that's what I think of when I think of as self-care, and I think that's going to look different for each and every one of us. Right.
That's so true, right? I can imagine how many people feel like that's selfish, right? Selfish has been painted such a bad word that every time I tell people that, they're like, that's selfish. I shouldn't think about myself first. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of do have to think about yourself first, because then how are you able to take care of anyone else, right? This whole idea of like, I know a lot of people always talk about, you have to fill your cup up, make sure you fill your cup up, which I'm not a big fan of that saying. What I usually try to tell people is that your cup is supposed to actually stay full. And what runs over is what you give to other people. You're not supposed to deplete, then fill up, then deplete, and then fill up, right? I need to always be taking care of myself. And then I can still take care of other people. I'm not supposed to just give, so I have nothing else to give. And now I'm in such dire need, and then I have to, it's just a roller coaster that's unnecessary. And so I think those are really, really great points. I don't know if you wanted to add something, Roz, before we wrap up. I mean, time has flown by. We are already like 3 minutes left. So if you have one more thing to add before we wrap up, Roz.
I just think, what I'm hearing though a lot is paying attention, being conscious, taking care of yourself, and being there for others. And that's really, really important. And so this is a very difficult time, but I think it's really important that you do everything, planning, making lists, making sure that you're aware and have, a structure. That's going to help you to feel good. These are things that you do when you're working to take care of everybody else. So it's about doing it for yourself. And I also want to say, I've seen some of the things that people have been saying in chat, and I think that's been great. I mean, I saw the chat about the dog and how everybody was helping each other figure out what to do if you don't have pet insurance, and it's getting from each other. So I think, there's a lot that you can get by taking care of yourself, and there's a lot you can get by connecting with your brothers and sisters that have a lot to give.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I hope this was really helpful to everyone. I learned some new things. I think everyone should have, hopefully made some notes. There was a lot of information given during this last hour. We'll also send out a resource list, some of the things that we discussed during this call. So I really want to thank Josh, Katlin, and Roz for this really, really fulfilling conversation. And I want to thank the members as well. And so if you can just hold on for a quick second, we would like for people to take a survey where we're going to show soon. And there also will be put up in a second or two our contact information. I'm always available for you guys. I'm here all the time. I have 4 Zoom support groups going on right now that I want you guys to visit, but also Roz is available, and Katlin's available, and Josh is available, and we're all really here to support each other and to support you at any time.
And we want to thank you, Nneka, for all the work that you're doing and all the help that you're giving to Local 1 members. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful week and evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.